Okay, good morning, good evening, depending on where you're dialing in from. My name is Hakim Farrell, and I am the Senior Director of Product Management at SlashNext. And today we're going to be talking about mobile phishing, the new battleground. So I'm going to provide you an overview of the mobile phishing threat landscape. We're going to cover the SlashNext technology, SEER. We'll be providing a number of different demos and closing off with why SlashNext and what sets us apart, and then covering some next steps and taking a few questions. So as some of you may know, the threat landscape has certainly changed and evolved in recent years. Malware as the attack weapon of choice has evolved into phishing now being the attack weapon of choice. And that is quite evident by the stark growth in phishing sites that we've been seeing. Now, this report is from Google Transparency Report. And within our own SlashNext Threat Labs, we saw a 3,000% increase in COVID-19 themed phishing websites during the second half of March compared to the first half. That's where we saw a significant increase. The types of phishing that are also being used has also evolved as well. Predominantly, phishing sites have been tied to being credential stealing and your typical fake login pages where it's asking a user to enter in their credentials. But we've also seen phishing payloads expand beyond credential stealing to also include social engineering scams that are credit card fraud websites trying to lure a user to enter in their credit card information. We've also seen scareware sites, your fake virus alerts, where it's trying to tell a user their machine's infected. Click here to clean it up now. Rogue browser extensions, that's trying to get users to install extensions to either watch movies or do something else, and all sorts of other types, phishing exploits and callbacks. And with the mobile threat landscape especially, we've also seen phishing move beyond email. Email has been predominantly the #1 vector of choice for many years, but now that has also evolved into SMS, social media, your collaboration platforms that you use to communicate internally and externally. Focusing on mobile itself, we've actually seen a number of reports that talks about 85% of the phishing attacks on mobile devices are now taking place outside of email. And those are via platforms such as SharePoint, social media, SMS, and so on, whereby attackers have realized that all of these other communication mediums is a great way to get a user to click on a link. Many times their guards are a bit down, and also they're less defended, right? A lot of organizations don't have the requisite tools to protect mediums beyond email, right? Everyone has some form of email security solution, but how do you effectively protect the other vectors beyond email? Now, attackers have certainly realized that as a weak point, which is why 85% of the attacks on a mobile are taking place outside of email. At SlashNext, we provide real-time end-to-end phishing protection. And driving that real-time end-to-end phishing protection is a technology called SEER that powers all of our phishing protection services, as well as our detect and respond services. So going through from left to right, we have a mobile phishing defense agent available both for Android and iOS, which I will cover in more detail and provide a demo. We also have our browser phishing defense, where we have browser extensions for all of the major browsers out there. We also have a network phishing defense that can be digested into a DNS security solution or a firewall solution. And then we have our detect and response services, where you can call or SEER engines live from a SOAR, TIP, or SIM platform to either perform threat hunting or phishing incident response. So SEER is an emulation detection engine whereby we will load a virtual browser of a page and perform machine learning to that page to determine whether or not that page is malicious. So we will perform natural language processing, optical character recognition, and by doing so, we've elevated the likelihood of precisely detecting a phishing page, but also minimizing the likelihood of falsely detecting a phishing page. If that page contains any form of evasion tactic, like it's has a CAPTCHA before it gets to the final destination, we do have the ability to bypass that. So SEER is 100% in the cloud engine, where we will do a dynamic runtime analysis on a URL, loading that page in a virtual browser to determine its final disposition, whether or not that page is malicious or benign. And that's what actually powers all of our protection services. And then you can call the SEER engines directly from web APIs or pre-built SOAR integrations for a detect and response use case. So just diving into SEER in a bit more detail here before I get into the demos. So SEER is sourcing threats from a number of different places. We're sourcing threats from spam traps, suspicious ad networks, cert logs, passive DNS information, and hardware sensors that we actually have in the wild. And all of that threat sourcing that we actually do, we will then load virtual browsers on all of the sources that we receive to determine whether or not our page is malicious. And when we're loading those virtual browsers, that's where we'll apply the natural language processing, the optical character recognition. If the page is surfacing any evasion tactics, like I mentioned, we will get around that to ensure that we are accurately detecting that page. So it's very important in order to provide protection on vectors outside of email. You need to ensure that you're sourcing your threats outside of email as well. Like it was mentioned before, 85% of the attacks on a mobile device are taking place outside of email. So we have a very broad threat sourcing conduit to pull into SEER to ensure that we have the ability to detect your SMS threats. We have the ability to detect threats that are only seen over social media. And we also have the ability to detect threats that are only seen on collaboration platforms as well. So that's what SEER is doing. And now I'm going to get into some more details on our protection and what that actually looks like. So as I mentioned, we have a mobile protection agent, both for iOS and Android. And this is where we're able to provide protection across all vectors. So both our mobile agent as well as our Android solution, mobile agent for iOS and Android solution, we will provide protection over SMS, social media, and everything else. We also have the ability to provide protection anywhere, right? Whether a user is within the confines of the network or they're outside of the network on Wi-Fi or on LTE, that protection is always on. And with that protection, we are also aiming to educate the user as well to ensure that they actually know what's being blocked, right? If it was a credential stealing page, we will provide a screenshot of that page and educate them to explain what credential stealing actually is. So now I'm going to transition into a demo and provide you a brief snippet of what that user experience is like, providing protection across multiple vectors. So here we have a user is typing in a URL in their browser, and they landed on a typo squatted page. Now that typo squatted page was very similar to the real domain youtube.com, but they type in youtube.com. And that redirected them to a fraudulent website, which we detected, we blocked, we provided them a screenshot of that lure page, along with what that web page was actually trying to do. Here we have a user clicking on a link within their email client, and across email too, they're also protected. So they get the top-down notification on iOS. They will get a screenshot of what that lure page actually looked like. It will tell them that it is actually a credential stealing page, and they will be able to see additional details on that threat. On SMS, we are detecting phishing SMS messages coming into the device, and anything we detect will be moved to that SMS junk tab that you just saw. On Skype, we will also provide protection on Skype as well. So if a user is clicking on a link from a Skype program, a Skype chat, they will be served up with a block page if we found it to be malicious, and they will also be protected. So we pride ourselves in ensuring that we're providing protection across all of those communication channels into that mobile device. Within the app itself, they can gain additional details around the threats that were blocked on the main dashboard. They can see a screenshot of that actual lure page and any other pertinent information surrounding what was actually going on that device. And all of this information is shared in real time with our cloud management portal so that the administrators of the service within an organization knows what's actually going on. And like I mentioned, these apps are available both for iOS as well as Android. So moving on to our browser extension. Our browser extension is also providing a similar level of multi-vector, multi-payload protection. So across all of those payloads that I mentioned earlier, where we're providing protection on email, on social media, on collaboration platforms, on SMS, if you're communicating using SMS or iMessage on your desktop client, you're provided that same level of protection. And covering social media, covering every sort of communication medium that you have on your client. Again, this is also providing protection anywhere, whether you're within the network or outside of your network. There's no dependency on you connecting to your corporate environment to ensure that a user is protected. And we support a number of different browsers, Chrome, Safari, Edge. From a visibility perspective, we're not affected by DOH or TLS. So we do have the ability to see all of this information because the blocking is happening on the device. So all of this inspection is happening pre-encryption. So it's very good in terms of the way we implemented it to ensure that we have that visibility to provide that protection. And let me transition over to a quick demo of the browser extension as well, so you can see what that looks like. So here we have a user browsing to a site iBank, and this iBank URL was also a credential stealing page, and we'll provide some details on what credential stealing is, just like the mobile user experience. We'll also provide the user a screenshot of that lure page so they can click on Save Preview to see that screenshot. And just by way of comparison, what we found is we're often able to detect threats 24 to 48 hours before many of the leading engines out there. And here we have, this site is not detected by anyone on VirusTotal as of right now. So we're very strong in terms of making sure that we're detecting those 0-hour attacks, which is one of the things that Seer does to set itself apart. Here we have a user clicking on a link from an email. Now, this is a slightly different phishing page. It's not credential stealing, but this was a rogue browser extension that a user can install to watch movies, as it was claiming. And here we're providing additional details as well. And if we look that up on VirusTotal, none of the engines are detecting it either, right? Now, this is clearly rogue browser extension. One of the engines marked it as suspicious, but they did not mark this page as actually malicious, and we are actually detecting it. The browser extension, you could also see, similar to the mobile, the different types of threats that were blocked. You can get a preview of the actual alert page. You can see the rogue extension threats versus the credential stealing threats. So it provides a very similar and intuitive user interface that a user can click through to see what threats have been blocked on their actual device. And both of these endpoint solutions, all of the telemetry, the advanced analytics, and the management of it is managed in a 100% in the cloud management portal. And within this management portal, that's where you would be able to manage your user groups, manage policies, manage deployments, how many users you're actually enrolled, how many have been activated. And this is where you'll see all of the advanced analytics. So from the moment a user clicks on a threat, that telemetry is reported back to the cloud console. So now I'm going to transition into a demo of our management portal. So here we have our management portal. And as you can see, this is where it will give you a snapshot of management for your organization, both from a deployment, user groups, as well as your licenses. So here you can create groups within your organization. And this little button at the top here you can transition over to see what the advanced analytics within your organization looks like. So as you can see, some of the threats I was just clicking on has already been reported to the management portal. So you can click into some of these incidents to see what these details look like. These were some of the threats I was clicking on. And the way we have broken down or advanced analytics is to 3 key buckets. You can get a user's view, what's the incident timeline over time based on users. You can get a threat view so that you can see what are some of the threats users within your organization is clicking on, from phishing to scareware to rogueware and so on. And then you can get an endpoint view. What are some of the incidents that are associated to certain endpoint flavors, whether it be specific browser versions or specific flavors of iOS versus Android. There's also a detailed incident view where you can see specific line by line incidents that are actually occurring within your organization. So you can click through and see exactly what was hackers clicking on, or you can scroll through and see exactly what was Jimmy clicking on, and so on. And then you could also schedule detailed reports. So you get a detailed view of those reports along with executive summaries that can be emailed out on a cadence that you predetermine. So now I'm going to transition back to our slideware and just close off with why/next. So by using the SEER threat detection engine, we have an extremely high detection rate of 99.07. By doing dynamic runtime analysis on everything that we see, we have unparalleled accuracy, with false positive being 1 in 7 million. And we're always providing a binary verdict. It's either malicious or it's benign. So high level of accuracy and confidence in that regard. Our protection is certainly end-to-end, covering all of the vectors that I just highlighted and demoed. And we are providing protection anywhere, whether a user is within the office or they're working remotely, which many of you are right now. The protection does not impact the user experience in any way, shape, or form. There's no latency in browsing experience. There is no concern around privacy because the blocking is happening locally on the device itself. And we do provide a fairly extensive way of deployment and integration. So from a deployment perspective, both our browser extensions as well as our mobile agents can be deployed using many of the industry-leading UEM and MDM solutions out there, or network solution can be integrated into a number of different firewalls and DNS security solutions. And then you can leverage or SEER technology directly from SOAR, TIP, and SIM platforms. So with that, feel free to ask any questions. You could certainly send in your questions over the chat, and I'm happy to answer some of those. The first question I see is, how do you overcome evasive techniques if the attacker is blocking public infrastructure IP? So the way we overcome is we use residential proxies when we are doing our dynamic runtime analysis in SEER to ensure that we're not going to these phishing sites from public infrastructure IPs. And by using residential IPs to the website, it will just simply look like that request loading that page is just coming from a home user and not from a piece of public infrastructure. And the second question is, how is your solution different than URL rewriting? So the way we're different than URL rewriting is simply a technology that many solutions use to recheck a URL at time of click. So if an email gateway misses a phishing URL at 12 noon, on average, most users click on an email within 3 minutes of it being delivered. What makes you think that that same solution will be able to detect it 3 minutes later at 12:03? The likelihood is extremely low. And URL rewriting solutions are typically simply doing domain token matching or checking the reputation of that URL to see if that reputation is changed and if it's malicious. Or SEER threat detection engine will do a dynamic analysis of that URL, perform the natural language processing, optical character recognition to really determine the final disposition of that page. So we're not dependent on the URL's reputation, because many URLs that are in the wild with great reputations can obviously become compromised, like many of you know. So I don't see any further questions coming in. So with that, please go to the URLs that are currently on the screen to request a trial or request a demo. At SlashNext, we're extremely excited for what we're able to bring to market to ensure that we're providing real-time, end-to-end phishing protection. Thank you. It's one more question here. Do you protect collaboration tools such as Zoom or WebEx? Absolutely. So if a attacker decides to use Zoom or WebEx as a vector to carry out their phishing attack, we will be able to ensure that the user is protected if they were to click on that link within Zoom or WebEx. So the answer to that is yes. I think that's all the questions that I see. Okay, thank you very much for your questions. It's certainly been a pleasure spending the morning and or afternoon with you, depending on where you are. And we will wrap it up here. Thank you.